All right, so welcome guys to the meeting today. Cash Club is welcoming Roger from Finery.io. Finery is a startup and one of the batches this year for Y Combinator, which is like you can think of it as like an incubator or like an accelerator for startups. It's one of the most well-known ones, and obviously it's a big stamp of approval for the company. So major kudos to Roger and his team for launching this startup here. And let me actually move on to the next slide here. So today we have our event agenda. We're going to start with some announcements. Actually, we'll move that towards the end and just kind of intro the event here. And we're also going to have Roger just say a couple of things, and we're going to have a Q&A with him just right afterwards. So just to kind of introduce Roger, he is the founder and CEO of Finery, and he also has experience in venture capital, among other things. I think he was also a musician. And he also is a Harvard alum. So welcome, Roger, to today's event.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Quick note, I'm not a Harvard graduate at all. I only did 2 years. I've since stepped away to go work on Finery full time. So perhaps somewhere down the line, I can go finish up those last 2 years, but I am in fact not a graduate. Just so
he's like almost a dropout, but not, it's like a gray area.
Something like that. Yeah, definitely a gray area. But thanks for having me. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, sounds good. So I'm just going to kind of walk through some questions here that we have prepared. And then you guys can feel free to ask some of the questions on your own as well. So, I guess the first question is just in general, how did you get into this field of finance? Specifically venture capital.
Totally, yeah. So I think it is important to make a quick distinction between venture capital and general finance, things like investment banking, hedge funds, private equity. Whereas those sort of deal more with numbers and finances, venture capital more so deals with investing in people, investing in teams, and investing in products. But in terms of how I actually discovered VC in college, it was through the startup world. So going into college, I had met a couple of upperclassmen who were working in the startup space, and I've really just caught that bug very, very early on. It made me very interested in potentially working on my own venture at some point down the line. So over the course of my 2 years in college, I was interested in either starting a company, going and working for a startup or in big tech, or eventually the next best thing, I guess, being a venture capitalist. But that's sort of how I got to that outcome.
Yeah, awesome. That's really interesting. I do think, and I was at some of the orientation programs for school, and they were just kind of talking about how, I think a lot of students don't really understand like the nuances between stuff like venture capital or private equity, or stuff like investment banking. So I guess it's just nice to be able to kind of, learn about that if you're interested in finance.
Totally.
And another question is, what kinds of opportunities did you pursue in high school and college that enabled you to be a successful entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I was looking at this question beforehand. Honestly, I did nothing absolutely nothing that related to investments of the stock market at all in high school. My big thing growing up was doing a lot of orchestra. I was a violist, did that basically 24/7 before going off to college and kind of doing the same thing. But honestly, I think the characteristics that are needed of any good founder is just a willingness to learn very quickly and adjust, as well as just a strong sense of resiliency. Startups are incredibly hard, and the people who are able to stick with it and then learn and adjust accordingly are probably going to be the better off founders. But in terms of hard relations to the things that I did in high school, there isn't really any.
And it's interesting because I think I kind of like realized that there are a lot of founders and they kind of discover their passion during college. I think a lot of people worry about, trying to start as early as possible. I have to do this in high school, I have to do that. But it seems like a lot of successful founders tended to kind of, let things happen, go with the flow and figure out what they really enjoyed over time. So Kaylin asked, why did you want to do venture capital?
Yeah, I just thought that the idea of investing in early stage startups was super cool. I think within the particular context of going to Harvard, doing VC isn't really the most common path. And I just really like the idea of doing something slightly different. That was also pretty lucrative. That's also definitely a factor as you get older. But the thought of supporting early stage founders, working alongside them to build a cool company just seemed really, really appealing. But I think the better option beyond that was also just trying and going to build my own company on my own. As it so happened, I came across this problem space that I was particularly interested in, and it worked out that I ended up being a founder myself, but definitely not ruling out being a VC somewhere down the line. That's always an option for any given founder, but VC is definitely super, super cool.
Right. And I think even just with VC, it's kind of like, even if you just start with VC, you can, or I guess it's kind of hard to start with VC, but if you do break into VC, you can always kind of, use those connections, leverage that, and become a founder yourself one day.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
There are tons of great VCs out there who actually go ahead and start companies right after. So there's definitely no concrete path as to which way you have to go and what steps you have to take. It can really just be on the fly. So for those of you out there who are either curious about being a founder or being a venture capitalist or going and working in other aspects of finance, don't feel like you need to do certain things at a certain time.
Absolutely. I think that's really interesting. Honestly, personally, I think that's not something I really thought about until recently. So it's just great to kind of hear that as early as you can in high school.
Totally.
So another question is, did you pursue investment related activities in high school? I think you kind of touched upon that. So we can also talk about, if you even had an investment club at your high school.
Do we have it? We did not, actually. There was no notion of a finance club at my high school. I'm not even sure if most people even knew what the stock market was. The only experience that I really had from back then was taking AP Econ my senior year, which even that didn't really teach me all that much about the stock market. So yeah, was completely just flying blind in terms of my experience with finance going into college even. And really my only relevant experience before starting Finery was the fact that I was a pretty avid Robinhood user. But yeah, didn't really have too much of a finance background going in.
Interesting. So I guess kind of like as a secondary question, does anyone on your team, is anyone on your team specialize in the stock market for Finery?
Not at all. Our only, like I was mentioning just for me, our only really relevant experience was the fact that we all used Robinhood, and we really experienced the pain point that we were trying to solve, which is we all loved talking about the stock market in our portfolios with our friends, but we were using the Robinhood app, iMessage, GroupMe, maybe Discord, and really just struggling with this very decentralized process of using all these 5 different platforms with the idea of why can't we just make one where you have all these tools under one roof? And that's sort of what we've built so far with Finery. But I guess the takeaway there is that with any given venture, it's not like you come up with an idea on the fly. It's kind of like solving your own pain points and things that you are dealing with personally.
And that's really interesting. I think I guess one thing that is interesting is you can work in a space, but you don't have to dive. I think one misconception all students have is you have to know everything about a field before you start a venture in it. I guess that's kind of I guess that's there are nuances to that. I guess in biotech, obviously you want to be there's you got to be a PhD, but even some other stuff. I remember just hearing stories about there's this case study about Run the Runway or some company like that, and they were talking about how oh, I never ever was in this fashion industry, but now I'm a founder and I sell dresses. So it's really interesting to kind of see that. And another question is, so how much does a community make a difference when you're making investment decisions? And what are your thoughts on platforms like Reddit, where investors can speculate together?
Obviously, I'm a little biased, but I think that having a community or having friends to engage with around the stock market and investments makes all the difference. Just to give a personal anecdote, when I first started investing, I had just gotten to college. I had maybe a couple $1,000s that I got from my high school graduation, and I started using Robinhood. And basically, I was able to take 2K, turn it into 10K using call options on Tilray stock, which at the time was the big meme stock. Made a ton of money, thought I was the best investor in the world, thought investing in general was just super easy. Quickly realized that it's actually incredibly hard. Over the course of 1 week following that period, I lost all my money, right? That's insane. I lost 10K as a college student. And it was because I was just using Robinhood alone. I had no one to consult on ideas with. I had no one to ask for advice or for guidance. And I was just basically thrown into the deep end alone. And one of the benefits of platforms like Fun or even Wall Street Bets is having this community of people that you can engage with, collab on ideas, and not just do things solo. But as for, Wall Street bets, I think in concept, it is really beautiful to have a community of investors on the internet. But obviously, in particular, with that type of community, there is there are certain behaviors that aren't great, like putting all of your money into, in the money call options on Clove stock or AMC stock. Probably not the most effective thing, but I do like Wall Street bets in idea, in theory.
Yeah, for sure. I think like I remember just like there are these concerns even on Robinhood, like people would be trading these very risky options. I think one unfortunate individual even I think committed suicide because he thought he had like almost $1 million in just losses, but it turned out it was just like a misunderstanding on the app because of like the UI. So I just think there's like a lack of I think it's like I guess a good example is like they're kind of diving headfirst into like the deep end of the swimming pool without having learned how to like do the basic swimming moves beforehand. So I just think that's interesting. But maybe having a community of people who have like more experience could help as well. And on something like Finery, maybe even just talking to people who are more well versed in finance, these influencers, that could be something that's a high potential.
Right. And I think it's really a range of community, right? It can be you and a couple of your friends. It could be you and thousands of other people who all love to talk about Tesla stock in particular. But I think really just in general, having people to collaborate with is really, really important to becoming a better investor. But that's sort of the underlying philosophy that we rely on here at Finery.
Awesome. We do have another question from Kaylin. So she asked, what makes Finery different from Wall Street Bets?
Yeah, so Wall Street Bets is more so of a general community, whereas Reddit is actually just a platform for any type of community, whether that be around the stock market, around sports, fashion, etc. Finery is specifically built for talking about the stock market and your personal investments. So we actually allow you to hook up to various investing tools, things like live stock market data, market news, the actual ability to connect to your brokerage and make trades from our platform. We're really optimized for that process of talking about your investments and then making those investments via our platform.
Right. And I guess to also clarify, I think Reddit is more, I think one issue with Reddit now is that there are some like bad actors now. I hear that there's like a lot of concerns with stuff like big companies trying to influence market movements by like, spreading information and stuff on there. So now that's a big concern. Reddit is, hit or miss in terms of moderation. So
Right.
that's one thing too. So I would, kind of be wary of what you read on there nowadays. I think, like 2 years ago, it was a bit more tightly knit. There's more of a community now. It's kind of all over the place. So something to think about as well. So another question that's more entrepreneurial is, how did you find/build your team at Finery?
Yeah. So one of the things that you realize with building a venture is that team is basically everything. It's really, really important that you're very thoughtful about choosing your co-founders. For me, I wasn't at all. I just did it very randomly. And it just so happened that I got very lucky that it worked out. But that's one of the big things that they teach at YC, being very particular about who you bring on as co-founders, because one of the things that you eventually realize is that working on a venture is not a short-term activity. It's something that is effectively like a marriage. It's a 10+ year relationship. And it's really, really important that you enjoy working alongside your co-founders, that you trust them, that you see yourself working together for a really long period of time. As for how I found my co-founders, one of them was my good friend from school. We were in the same fraternity and really just bonded over our interest in startups, entrepreneurship, and also just building cool products. And then my co-founders, these two guys from MIT, I found them super randomly. I went on LinkedIn, looked up MIT computer science, and the first guy who popped up I thought looked cool, reached out to him, and now he's my co-founder. We've been working together for 1.5 years. That does not usually happen. I got very, very lucky with that. But for those of you who are thinking about going and starting ventures in the future, definitely be very, very careful about who you want to work alongside.
Yeah, that's brings up a really good point, because actually just coincidentally yesterday I was at like a school sponsored event and we got to listen to Michael Siebel, who I think is the CEO of Y Combinator.
Yeah.
And one thing he was saying was like, he actually recommended co-founding, these organizations with your friends, because I think someone asked him, is it a smart idea to work with your friends on these ventures? And what he was saying was, yeah, absolutely. I think he started something called Justin TV, which turned into Twitch.
Yep.
And what he was saying was like, uh, Justin really was like an interesting character in a sense, but he really enjoyed that experience, and it like helps get you through the tough times, is what he was saying, that relationship.
Right. Yeah, startups can be really, really hard most of the time, and it's really important that you have those people alongside you who can just operate in the trenches and just push through. But I think in terms of the general concept of starting a company with friends, it's either hit or miss. There have been startups where the co-founders are just best friends all throughout. I think Airbnb is a success story on that front. But then there are also instances where there are terrible breakups. I mean, Facebook being a prime example, if anyone's seen The Social Network, like that's one example there. So I wouldn't set any hard rules on whether or not you found a company with your friends or not, but it can definitely go both ways, and it's important to be aware of that.
So I think, I think one thing that he also mentioned is like, or someone on the panel mentioned is that I think most companies actually do fall apart. I think because of co-founder, quarrels, like they fight versus having something like a bad idea. That's what he was saying. So
Right.
I think people like Ray Dalio, they have like these kind of quirky ways of helping you kind of mix and match founders. I think he has like a personality test he made about like which types of personalities work well together. I think that's a bit of a pseudoscience, but I think it was an interesting approach.
Yeah.
So another question on that same line of thought is, how's your experience with Y Combinator been to this point?
Yeah. So we're done with Y Combinator at this point. Our particular batch, the Winter 21 batch, was January to March, and it was a fantastic experience. We learned a ton about startups. YC is really, really great about taking this complex world and complex concept of running a business and boiling it down to very simple philosophies and ideas. Things like make something people want, figure out what problem you're solving, and talk to your users. Very, very basic ideas that actually go a very long way in building great businesses. And it shows with their track record. They've backed Airbnb, Coinbase, Reddit, Instacart, all these wonderful companies. But we learned a ton. Got to go to really cool speaker events with the founders of Airbnb, Justin Kahn, who started Twitch, and just a ton of cool people. So it was a really great experience.
And it's really quite great. I think that YC is definitely kind of like the leader in incubating these young people. One thing that Michael Sieb also said was that, Y Combinator kind of grew out of this idea of just helping young people who can code, just funding them and helping them start companies.
Right.
And that was like such a new idea back in the early 2000s. Because I think what he was saying was back in the day, you had to have like an MBA and you'd only get funded if you were X number of years in the industry. But I think, with all these tools that are available nowadays, especially with all this information available on the web for people to learn, it's so much easier now to get something off the ground.
Totally.
And that kind of relates to Rayan's question here. What programming language did you guys use to create Finery?
So our platform is built with Python on the back end, React on the front end, and then we use Google Firebase as our database system. That's what we're using for now. Things could possibly change in the future, but very, very particular question there.
Right, those three tools are all like super learnable online.
Yeah.
And that's something to say you can create something like Finery in like a week, but it's definitely, these are all things that are easily learnable for people our age.
Totally.
So another question that I forgot to ask was, did working in VC help you attract investors / understand how to improve your startup?
I don't think it necessarily attracted investors. That was more so a result of being YC. But it helped me understand how investors think and what their incentives are, whether that be getting short-term returns or being in it for the long run. But it also helped me understand who's who in Silicon Valley and what funds are particularly good at certain things. So when I went out to go fundraise our seed round for Finery, I basically had an idea of who I wanted to talk to, who would be a great partner, and it ended up working out very, very well. But definitely helped to have some of that prior knowledge.
Right. I think that was a great question. I think that definitely, I think even just to get into a field like that, like VC, some people I think say also you want to even work in a different financial field beforehand, like IB, to get like, like a set of training wheels before you ride a bicycle is kind of what they say. I guess that's a bit off topic, but I just thought I'll mention that because it seems like it's always repeated. But the idea is like skills kind of transfer from stage to stage and actually, I don't really know what I was going with that, but I'll move on to the next question. But what new features can we look forward to in Finery in the future?
Totally. So the big thing that we're really excited to roll out for the fall semester and beyond is investing competitions on Finery. So I think what we've discovered very recently is the fact that young people in particular really want to prove that they're the best investors. So we're really excited to actually roll out competitions where our individual users and even investing clubs, whether that be at high schools or colleges, can compete on the long term. We definitely don't want to, fuel speculative behavior like trading options on a 2-week time frame, but we are really looking forward to setting up long-term competitions probably over the course of the fall semester, the spring semester, maybe the entire year, just to allow all of you guys to prove who the best investor is.
And that's awesome. And hopefully even Cash Club can participate in those competitions as well.
Totally.
And just, build a community on the app.
Right.
So we had another question that was DM to me. What stage was Finery at when you started pitching to investors? Did you try to make a few batches of sales? Was it purely an idea or somewhere in between?
At that point, it was the beginning of our Y Combinator batch, and we had decided to sort of pivot our idea from being Reddit for investing to Discord for investing. So back then, our product was very much forum based. So it was about posting your ideas to a message board, having people vote up and down on it, just like Reddit, but having specialized investing tools. But we quickly realized that that probably wasn't going to work. I remember going to office hours with Michael Seibel, and he was like, "This idea sucks. Like, you need to go change it." We're like, "Okay." So we shifted to Discord for investing, which is more so based around group chats, with the understanding that young people love to have chat-based interactions, whether that be using Discord, using text message, even things like Snapchat. Having those spontaneous back and forth interactions with your friends is really what it's all about. So we built this new platform, and then simultaneously, that was when Wall Street Bets really started to pop off, and we decided, okay, this is a great time to go fundraise and really pitch our vision for, the platform for social investing. So at the time, we had a very, very, minimal MVP with very few features, but we were able to basically fundraise with this idea of young people want to have this specialized social investing platform. We're the team to build it. Please fund us.
And it's interesting. I guess it's kind of also, I keep saying interesting, but it's kind of funny to hear so much about Michael because I just remember like hearing him yesterday and he seemed like a very eccentric character. He was just roasting like ideas.
Yeah.
Like, he was saying stuff like, "Oh, I would never invest in a company that has platform in their idea or like big data or like these buzzwords."
Yeah.
And one thing he was also saying is like, he really had this emphasis on like software too. Like he said that, like 100 years ago, a lot of companies didn't use electricity, and some even thought electricity was like a fad. But what he was like kind of comparing that to was software is like the new electricity. Like in the next few years, a lot of these companies are going to, software will always be there. It'll be kind of like maybe running in the background, not super, super unique. Maybe, it's kind of taken for granted after a while, versus whereas now it's like very fresh. But it's something that'll always be there. There'll always be a need for it. Kind of like a commodity.
Totally.
So I guess one question then from me is like, what kind of skills do you think are necessary then to innovate now in entrepreneurship?
Just like I mentioned before, as a founder, being incredibly willing to learn and adjust accordingly, having a strong sense of resiliency and not giving up. One of the things that they taught us at YC is that 90% of YC companies fail because their founders just give up, right? They don't not find product market fit. They aren't able to not go fundraise. They just simply realize that things are too hard and they want to stop working on this company. So they just give up. So by having that strong sense of resiliency and just continuing to push through, even when things get really hard, and they definitely will, chances are you'll probably have things work out. The third is probably having not a deep passion, but a deep interest and a sense of care for the particular problem that you're solving, right? If my team and I were building a company around, I don't know, fashion. I'm not really into fashion. I probably wouldn't have that much energy and drive to go work on this on a daily basis, especially when things get hard. But for the stock market, I love investing. I love using Robinhood. So being able to work on a social investing platform that my friends can use, that I can use, is really, really impactful and really just a lot of fun. So those three things, right? Learning a lot, being resilient, and actually working on something that you care about.
Yeah, that's interesting because I feel like even like that's obviously like super important for like from the personal level, but even to like VCs, because I know like from X Fund at Harvard, like Patrick Chung at like this orientation thing was saying, we really can kind of see like if you're just like, I think they use the word whiteboarding, although I don't know if that's like a actual term, I don't know, but that what they basically meant is like some people kind of hop along for a ride and they're just trying to make it big, make it rich fast.
Right.
Um, through entrepreneurship, but they kind of would rather invest in companies where there's like a personal motivation, like a
Right.
personal story behind it. So I think that's great that you bring that up because I think a lot of people, especially our age, we're in high school, we just like want to be entrepreneurs, kind of for one the prestige, the title, and kind of like it's like a hot trend right now. So I think that's interesting to bring up. Rayhan asked, what competitive advantages do you hold over a company like Discord?
Yeah. So the simple answer there is that Discord is a platform for a lot of different types of conversations. Gaming, sort of investing, maybe it's fashion. It's kind of like Reddit. It's a generalized platform for any type of interaction with you and your friends. At Finery, we're solely focused on fostering community and conversation around the stock market. And by really focusing on those types of features, that type of user, we're really able to differentiate ourselves because from a user perspective, why would you use a Discord platform when you could have basically the same thing, but all your investing tools? Like I mentioned before, live stock market data, market news, the ability to make trades with your brokerage, competitions around investments, just a lot of cool features that are specifically related to why you're using the platform.
Yeah, I think even one thing to add is like, if we have investment competitions on there too, sponsored by the company, I think that's also a big plug. It's just more investment focused
Right.
versus, having something that's kind of like the one size fits all.
Right.
So Shivam says, I liked Fineary's feature of connecting to many different brokers or brokerages. So is Fineary planning on adding any more?
Totally. So right now we're working on Robinhood, but pretty soon we'll have things like TD Ameritrade, Fidelity, and then we're also super excited to build a connection to platforms like Coinbase and MetaMask because we're realizing that a lot of people not only want to trade public equities or stocks, they also want to trade cryptocurrencies, tokens. So we're really excited to incorporate that into the platform as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's really something to look forward to. I think it'll be really cool to have like basically it's like a one-stop shop for you to just invest, talk with people instead of, rapidly on your phone switching through like screens all of a sudden. So
Exactly.
really convenient. So another question here is, are there any books or any other media, say like Paul Graham essays, for example, that inspired you to take up entrepreneurship and finance?
I think the books that I did read before actually starting Fonry were 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, who is the founder of PayPal, now the head of Founders Fund, which is a very popular venture capitalist fund. And he was also the first outside check into Facebook. So he's a great founder. 0 to 1 is a great book. The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is basically a book talking about how hard startups can really be, written by Ben Horowitz. He's also a very famous venture capitalist at Andreessen Horowitz, another big firm. And then the third is probably the Airbnb story, which is basically about how these three guys who went to design school were able to start Airbnb, which is now one of the most influential companies in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I remember even one story about Airbnb was that they were trying to raise funding. So I think what they did was it was like around the time of the election. So they were like So one part of that was like they made these cereal boxes with I think
Right.
faces of like Obama on them, and they were just selling them for like $30 or something crazy. But it like blew up, it went viral. So
Exactly. And that
really
goes back to what I was saying earlier about really being resilient in that those guys were tens of thousands of dollars in credit card debt, spending it on their company and really just failing over and over. But they were incredibly resilient, were creative enough to come up with those cool cereal boxes. And that's actually what got them into YC. And then the rest is history. But really just pushing through and never giving up is one of the key factors of being a great founder.
right, absolutely. And I think now they're like the biggest YC company by valuation too. If I don't know, or somewhere up there. So that's really impressive that they, started at this kind of low spot and then just flew up all
Right.
the way to the top. So Caitlin asks, do you still practice viola now since you are such an advanced musician? Haha.
No, I wish I did, but I haven't really touched my viola in months at this point, which is a little unfortunate. Things are pretty busy here at Finery, but I definitely want to get back into it. I just don't necessarily have as much time as I did back in high school or in college, but I really do miss it a lot.
Interesting. So Rosia said, I'm super excited for crypto. What tips would you give to someone who's just starting out?
Um, Very good question. I would really encourage you to read up more about what exactly cryptocurrency is, as well as looking into the whole space of decentralized finance, which is basically what a lot of these tokens refer to in terms of why you invest in them. But then also looking at some of the white papers around Bitcoin and Satoshi Nakamoto, and then what exactly Ethereum is. A lot of really, really cool stuff. And it gives you actually the foundation to understand why certain tokens have value.
It's funny you mentioned decentralized finance because I think one thing Michael also mentioned in that like fireside chat yesterday is like he will never ever invest in anything about like DeFi because he just thinks it's like a scam. So I don't
I
know.
would
That's just
support
reminded
that,
me.
but that's just everyone's entitled to their own opinion.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. He has some very strong opinions, so that
Yeah,
was funny. So Kaylee asks, what is the main tool for your product designers? Figma, Sketch? I don't know what those are, but
just Figma, just Figma.
hmm, interesting. So Garrett asks, is Finary's business model a subscription-based, ad-based, or freemium type, and why?
For now, it's sort of freemium. I guess the way that I explain it is that there are certain communities on Finery with specific channels that are paid. And if you want access to them, you either pay an annual or a monthly subscription, of which Finery takes a small 7% commission. But down the line, I'm sure we'll roll out some type of freemium model where you get access to premium features for maybe a monthly subscription. And then beyond that, we're also excited to find various other ways of monetizing our platform. But for now, it's mainly based around subscriptions.
Awesome. And Shivam asks, what was the most important idea about startups you took away from YC?
Definitely what I just mentioned, that the vast majority of startups fail because their founders give up, which is totally fine because startups are super, super hard. But it's good to know that most people don't go out because they can't raise money or they can't get users. It's because they just decide not to go forward with their company. So I think as long as me and my co-founders continue to push through, even when things get hard, and are just in it for the long term, we'll be totally fine.
Awesome. Kaustup asks, what's the long-term goal for the incorporation of Finary into an investor's trading routine?
That's a very good question. So our mission here at Finery is to become the world's best investing community. So Wall Street bets, those conversations you have with your friends about the stock market over text message, Discord investing groups, all of those will be obsolete. We want all those conversations to happen solely on Finery. We want to be every investor's first destination for community on the internet. And in terms of how that incorporates into a given person's routine with investing, we want people to be more social, more communal, more collaborative when they invest in the stock market. So when you need someone's second opinion or you want to source ideas, we hope all that will occur on Finery.
All right. And now Caitlin asks, how are you promoting Finery?
Yep. So for now, it's primarily through the investing creators who live on Finery. People like Austin Hankwitz, who I think came and talked to you guys a bit ago. Really great guy, one of our angels here at Finery. We basically focused a lot of effort and time on building these really great features for people like Austin and other creators. And as a result, because they're able to make money on our platform and foster this great community, they go out and tell their followers on TikTok and bring them back to the platform. So that's sort of how we think about promotion and distribution. But like I mentioned just earlier, we're also really excited to get more promotion via our competitions, which we'll be hosting, probably late in the fall and throughout the entire school year.
All right. Kaylee asks, how large is your product designer team?
Ooh, very niche question. Very wise question. At this point, it's about 2 people, 2 part-timers who work for us. It's typical in early stage startups that you don't necessarily have a large design team, but we're definitely really excited about scaling over time and really fostering a 10-star design culture here at Finery.
Awesome. Now, Samira asks, what is the most important piece of advice? Okay, sorry. What is the most important piece of advice you have learned throughout your entrepreneurship journey that you wish you had heard when you first started?
Startups are really hard, like really, really hard. I thought grinding at college and grinding in high school was hard. Startups are way harder than that. There's a lot of pressure and a lot of responsibility involved, right? You have employees who are reliant on you and the company and the success. You have investors who want, an ROI on their checks into your company. And you have users who are expecting a very great experience. And in particular with Finery, we're basically having people trust us with how they navigate the stock market, which is a very large responsibility. So dealing with all of that and also the day-to-day operations of growing a business, especially as a young founder, is very, very difficult. But more so than all of that, it's incredibly rewarding, which is why we all do it. But I wish I knew that going in that startups were really hard, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I've really enjoyed my experience thus far and would highly recommend it to anyone who's thinking about potentially starting their own venture in the future.
Amazing. Raghav kind of asked a similar question here, in that getting a startup off the ground is obviously tough. How did you learn about the process of entrepreneurship? For example, how did you learn to pitch to angels and VCs?
Definitely trial and error. When we were raising our seed round back in the winter, I basically pitched about 70 VCs over the course of 1 month, which was a lot, very, very intense. And at the beginning, I was super bad at them. I was terrible at pitching these investors, terrified of asking them to put money into Finery. But over time, like I was mentioning before, you just learn really, really quickly, you adjust accordingly, and you eventually get better at certain skills. So that's sort of how that process went.
All right. Now we have just a couple more questions here that are pre-prepared. So one of them is, what motivates you to be an entrepreneur? Was there a specific moment in your life that inspired you to go on this journey?
Totally. So I think I mentioned this before, but the initial concept and idea and inspiration for Finery really came from personal experience, in that I had all this money in the market, made a ton of it, then lost all of it and realized, okay, there must be a better way of, helping young people engage with their friends, collaborate and communicate and become better investors as a whole. How about we go build a platform for that? Sorry, John, can you repeat the question? I kind of forgot the second part.
Oh yeah. So was there like a specific moment in your life or just in college that kind of inspired you on this journey? Was there like a very specific moment that you remember?
Gotcha. So that was the inspiration for, the initial idea behind Finery. But as for how I got into, the general entrepreneurship space, my favorite movie growing up in high school and in middle school was The Social Network. And I thought the idea of working on your own venture was super, super cool. And even now, after being a founder for over a year at this point, it's definitely worth it. You get to learn so many cool things on a daily basis, do various different jobs that you would never do in any other type of job. And it's really just super fulfilling to work on a problem that you actually care about. Another thing that you discover at this point is that a lot of people really hate their jobs, which is not ideal. And it's really awesome just to do something that you care about on a daily basis. So that's sort of the biggest benefit and perk of being a founder.
And that's awesome. I think like being able to do something that you're, passionate about versus working on Excel 24/7 is probably something that most people would love to do. Um,
Right.
and on a similar note, although not quite, what was your favorite scene from The Social Network? Anything like you just really remember from that movie?
Totally. Really love the scene where the opening scene where his girlfriend breaks up with him. He goes back to his dorm room, and then the intense music comes on and he starts coding. I think it was Face Mash was the name of the platform that he built back then. Just really having that intense energy and desire to go build something really cool. Even though that particular product was pretty terrible and like very offensive, just this excitement around building something that you wanna. It's really cool.
And that's amazing. I'm honestly, I think for me, I liked when he met the Winklevoss twins, like in
Mm,
that area with that Indian dude, and he was just, I don't know, it just seemed kind of intimidating, but
yeah.
I just thought that was memorable. Or I think the intro to the guy who Justin Timberlake plays was kind of
Yeah.
interesting too.
Right.
Um, I don't remember his name for some reason, but he's
Right.
famous too. I think he's
Sean
like the
something.
PayPal founder. Yeah, Sean something.
Yeah.
Um, so Kaylee asks, did you use a team of user researchers in the process of creating Finery?
We were our own user researchers, really. The biggest thing that our team did before even writing our first line of code that probably took 4 or 5 months was doing a ton of user research, understanding what people currently use to have these social engagements around the stock market. So we sent out user surveys via Instagram to our own personal networks. We emailed people that we knew. A big thing that I spent that particular summer doing was posting all over Reddit and r/investing about this idea that we had, just getting a ton of feedback, having people make fun of me, which is really funny, DMing people on Reddit, on Yahoo Finance message boards, on stock twits, and really just understanding, why do you like to have community around the stock market? What problems are you facing and what do you wish is better? And then just going out and building a solution to all of that.
It's funny that you mentioned spamming Reddit because with Cash Club, we did that with some events and then like on college subreddits and then they like banned us off them.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's just kind of funny. I think Reddit is a very, very mixed set of people on there. Kind of just depends on the communities, but um, it's kind of interesting to see like your startup kind of grow from like this idea that you guys have with a group of friends and
Yeah.
programmers into something that's hopefully going to grow into something really big in the future. So it's kind of inspiring to see that story, and it all starts with stuff I think a lot of people are hesitant to do, like just straight up go out there, push your idea, push your passion. So I think that's really awesome. So we have another question from the chat from Shivam. How do you deal with disagreements among the founders?
Totally. Like I was saying before, in terms of getting lucky with my co-founders, I think we were particularly fortunate to have three very thoughtful, grounded people who are able to work through disagreements very reasonably. So basically, there are three of us, and when we want to vote on something, it's basically majority rules or measuring how strongly certain people feel about certain things. But in general, we're able to work through those disagreements, and it isn't really an issue with us, especially because we're very much all aligned on this mission of building the world's best investing community. In a lot of cases, the answer becomes quite obvious, and we're pretty much aligned. But definitely really important to have very thoughtful and reasonable co-founders, which is why I'll go back to advice about being very thoughtful about choosing who you want to start a company with.
All right. And this is slightly similar, but what do you then kind of do to decompress and just kind of relax and make sure that you don't burn out, especially as a team?
Yeah. So, both for myself and my team, a big value of ours at Finery is to really just have fun. So making sure that people are able to, have a life outside of the office and going out and doing their own fun things. We actually just got an Xbox here in the office. So I just got whooped in FIFA earlier today by my co-founders, but really just fostering a fun, collaborative environment where people don't, necessarily feel pressured to work all the time. Um, as for how I personally decompress, I make sure to, hang out with friends after work, go to restaurants, try out cool concerts in various venues, just making sure that I do other things aside from thinking about Finery 24/7, which I can get in the habit of sometimes, but just making sure I have a nice work-life balance.
Awesome. So yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I think some people get so worked up, they like think about their idea or whatever for like the whole day and it burns them out. So, taking time to decompress, I think, makes you more efficient in the long run. So interesting
Totally.
point. Rayon asks, how many people are currently in your team?
So we're about 7 people total at this point and aiming to get to 9 people total by the end of the summer. And beyond then, probably hopefully scaling way faster pretty soon. But right now we're at 7 and it's been a great time so far.
All right. And as one of our last questions here, how can students like us engage in Finery? Is there, are there any opportunities from Finery? Are there any, things that students like us can do to join?
Totally, yeah. So first and foremost, definitely go sign up and create an account on Finery. In my opinion, it's a much better way of talking about the stock market relative to iMessage or GroupMe or whatever you might be using these days. I believe, John, you created a group for Cash Corp already, so there's already that set up. But in terms of getting more directly involved, one of the things that we're exploring is an ambassador program for high school students who, want to bring more people into the stock market and really help us build this community. So, I'll follow up with more details around that, but really just excited and humbled by, people who might want to come along for the mission and help us there.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's really, really cool. And plus you can even join other people's groups on there as well, like Austin Hankwood's group, as well as the normal Finery group. I think I even saw like influencers like John Fish in the normal one, because I wanted the John username, but it was taken. So that's interesting.
That's
yeah, it's kind of funny to see him. I think that kind of, does anyone have any final questions you want to ask? Going once, going twice.
Cool.
All right.
Wait, I had a question. I just couldn't type fast enough. How did you come up with your logo?
Oh, one of our designers basically took the F in Finery and decided to, come up with this new logo that kind of conveyed, different parts coming together to make one whole, sort of the idea of various people in the stock market coming together to make a community, diverse shapes in particular. But realistically, we'll probably actually change that logo, fairly soon down the line, but we like it for now.
I like it too. I think it's pretty. I think also I just noticed this, but if you like kind of turn your head around, it looks like a person.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good user feedback. I appreciate it.
Oh no, it's like if you turn it upside down, it's like a person doing that.
Right.
So
exactly.
it's interesting. Yeah, I guess, does anyone else have any questions? Just feel free to blurt out.
Yeah, y'all can unmute and just ask questions if you want.
I mean, if that does it for questions, that's totally cool. I guess a couple more things that I do want to, convey is that, like John was mentioning earlier, there has never been a time historically where it's been so easy to start your own company. As long as you can code or you have friends who can code, it's really easy to go start your own company or your own venture. The other thing is that, one of the other biggest killers of startups is the fact that a lot of people have ideas around things they want to go start, but they never do it. So I'd really encourage you, if you have ever wanted to start your own venture, to really just do it, like the Nike slogan, just do it. Spend 10 hours every weekend working on it with your friends and just really stick with it for a month. And if you make progress, that's great. If you don't, that's totally fine. But just really make sure to start, because most people just don't. And the other biggest thing that I do want to convey, and that I tell to a lot of other people who are thinking about becoming founders, is that you don't have to be the smartest person ever. You don't have to have the highest GPA, be the most accomplished to be a great founder. For me, I didn't have a high GPA. I didn't have a huge background or experience in finance. I was just a Robinhood user who wanted to make the stock market more social. And here I am, right? Even giving a more hard, concrete example, the founder of Airbnb, which is now close to a $100 billion company, was literally a design school student who had no experience with travel. And now he's the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the world. So do not feel like you have to be the most amazing person in the world to be a successful founder. It's really just like what I said about being quick at learning and adjusting accordingly, being relentless and resilient, and then just finding a problem that you really care about and want to solve. That's it. It's that simple. But yeah, thanks for having me, everyone. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, major thank you to you, Roger, for taking time to speak with our club today. Hopefully we can do more events in person, and maybe even do like some hybrid Zoom type thing too, just to get more members involved. Really, thank you for taking the time. We really appreciated your insight into stuff like Finery and YC. It's really interesting. And
we're really looking forward to integrating Finery into Cash Club this year, going
Totally.
forward as our main platform of communication. So thank you.
You got
Yeah.
it.
For sure. So, just stay in touch. We'll stay in touch with events for you guys and members, and just kind of, stay up to date with everything Finery and Cash Club related. And thank you again to Roger for joining us today. So you guys can all wave your goodbyes and stuff. Really quickly, I'll just run through the other stuff on this slide. So, you guys know what Cash Club is. We have branches and we have clubs, and we also you can kind of go on our website here, or even Instagram. And if you want to start your branch here, or just go on our website, which will actually be updated. We're currently working on that with our new web developer, who is Mason. So thank you to Roger again for his time today. We really enjoyed the presentation. It was awesome. And so for the attendance form, we just kind of took a list of names down instead of doing a form, because it was probably easier. So it's no worries. You don't have to worry about that. So thank you guys for all coming. It's just a great time today. And we will hope to see you, during the school year too.
Thanks for the invite. Take care, everyone.